This is the last talk. To make forgetful animals into human beings, a blind force strikes that dismembers and inscribes their bodies in the real, until pain itself brings forth a memory. That's a quote from Friedrich Hitler, a media theorist who was writing about the gramophone, typewriter, and radio. So in this quote, we find that what separates us humans from animal, superior from inferior, is memory itself. I myself have a terrible memory, and I often find that it's quite problematic, especially when I'm trying to find my way around things. At the same time, I also question permanence as a measurement of success. Ever since the invention of the written word, one of the earliest forms of memory storage technology, we find ourselves privileging written history over oral history. And in that sense, we've been constructing this mode of writing history and producing and acquiring knowledge that privileges these dominant modes, these hierarchical modes of knowing and being. Gramophone is another storage technology, recording sound, which was originally invented by Edison for recording speech, dominant speech in particular. So he was really interested in capturing voices, speech of important people, which would be stored and propagated throughout the ages. He wasn't even thinking about the commercial side of recording music itself. In a quote by this one conductor, he says that it would be an important instrument for recording the practices of the performing elite. And I find this so weird because, well, actually not weird, but it actually captures this moment which sort of sets a precedence for recording and recording standards, because it standardizes music and it does not allow room for error, for noise, for glitch. And so we find this really clean-cut aesthetic in recording music and recording sound in general. The internet is the ultimate memory storage technology that we're dealing with these days. Everything that you write, everything that you take photos of, that you put on the internet is recorded almost forever. 60 years later from now, you will probably regret your photos of being here, doing whatever drunk things you'll do during this pub quiz. There are so many examples of people who have not gotten jobs because their employers looked on their Facebook and found them wearing sexy nurse outfits and getting drunk on really weird cocktails. The internet was originally kind of the promise of the protean self, this promise of being able to express yourself anonymously and being constantly fluctuating in your identity. And yet it's become this rigid technology for policing, for surveillance. And so out of this has come a demand for forgetting technologies, such as Snapchat, Wicker, Tiger Text, apps that allow people to send messages or images with a set amount of time before it's deleted. And out of this is something that's really interesting. People are interested in forgetting technology. People don't want to just be locked into archive fever, into retromania. And I think there's a reason for this. Because there are forms of forgetting that are creative. And I'm interested in this. I'm interested in forgetting as a creative methodology. It's not just destructive. It's not just forgetting the past. It's about creating a relationship to the new, constantly refreshing it. In education, we find that the way that we learn is very hierarchical. We always learn what is useful, what is valuable, and discard everything that is not. So it's a dual process that's going on right now. It's, first of all, a legitimizing process. So whatever is counted as a form of a dominant knowing, dominant form of being, is propagated. It's recorded and it's preserved. Then there's the other side. Any knowledge that is deemed inferior is delegitimized and it's discarded. And this is what happens in colonial archival practices. right? Oral history is just left by the wayside, whereas the culture and the history of the winner, the colonial power, remains preserved. And of course this is problematic because when we think of knowledge, we think of things that are tried and true, and things that sort of survive the test of time. And that can't be the only way that we value knowledge. How are aesthetics and ideology standardized and imposed to the point of stagnating creativity? We need to think about this. We also need to think about how we have come to accept certain practices and beliefs, and how we value them over others because they are tried and true. Jack Halberstam, who wrote The Queer Art of Failure, wrote that forgetting is associated with radical action and a revolutionary relation to the new. And I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about a moment in musical history, Afrofuturism. So a kind of forgetting that I'd like to talk about is a collective forgetting to get over a certain trauma, slavery in this context. So I would like to recontextualize this in the form of forgetting as recontextualizing, mythologizing, and mutating. Kujo Eshen, who is a writer on a lot of really great sound theory and Afrofuturism, calls this as a form of assembling counter-memories to the colonial archive. One figure that's really big in Afrofuturism is Sun Ra. He's a musician, a jazz musician who wrote music and believed that he may have come from Saturn. One day he decided to drop out of college after 1 year because he said that he had a vision that aliens came to him and said, "You need to get out of school." That's it. He just left. So he started connecting ancient Egyptian aesthetics to space aesthetics and came up with this Afrofuturism. And Kujo Eshen calls this the oscillation between pre-industrial Africa and scientific Africa. And I think this alternative rerouting of history is really a beautiful and creative form of rewriting your history and really empowering a group of people. Ra, like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, also renounced his name, which was Herman Poole Blount. It's a pretty ugly name. He considered it a slave name, which is why he renounced it. He called it an imaginary name, a pseudonym. He said anything other than Ra is an imaginary person. In terms of forgetting with animals in the animal kingdom, one animal that is really associated with forgetting is the goldfish, right? 3-second memory myth. So ironically, this myth came from an advertisement that nobody remembers. I couldn't find anything on this at all. But goldfish can actually remember a human's voice for at least 1 year, for up to 1 year. That's pretty incredible. Another popular instance of forgetting in fish is Finding Nemo's Dory, the blue fish who had a really bad short-term memory. What she reveals in this movie, in this instance of creative forgetting, is that she's able to access alternative ways of navigating the world by bypassing all pre-existing knowledge structures, common sense, and an instinct of self-preservation. So even though she seems like this kind of bumbling bimbo that swims around the world, like not really knowing anything, she's able to do things like make friends with sharks, read English, and find Nemo. In one study on owl monkeys, regions of the sensory cortex connected to touch sensations were mapped after one or more fingers were amputated. The sensory input from the remaining fingers shifted to the missing finger's exclusive brain region. So, from this study, we find that the sensory areas of the brain that map different parts of the body are not hardwired, but unexpectedly fluid. And I find this the potential of the implications of this study really powerful. Because if the sensory parts of your body are not hardwired, then what else could be flexible. Forgetting is not only forgetting what you know, it's about forgetting how you know. It's about getting lost. It's an active refusal to internalize hierarchical systems of superior and inferior knowledges. So forget. Get lost. Thank you.
Yeah.